Question number 7, Grant Robertson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Acting Minister of Finance. Does he agree with Reserve Bank Governor Graeme that, quote, GDP growth on a per capita basis has been slow and labour productivity growth has been disappointing? House price inflation is much higher than desirable and poses concern for financial stability, and the exchange rate is higher than the economic fundamentals would suggest is appropriate.
Oh. Read it as it's on the
Order.
It's right there, Jerry.
Order.
No, there's no
Order.
Oh, point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Order. No. Order. The member will resume his seat. There was so much interjection, I couldn't actually hear the question being read. I'm going to invite the member to ask the question again, and I'm certainly going to demand far less interjection than's occurring from my right-hand side. Maybe a reason to be excited, but we'll still have question time conducted according to the rules. Grant Robertson.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Grant Robertson.
Mr. Speaker, I think just to help with the Leader of the House's mood, he was concerned that I used the phrase... No.
Order.
He was confused.
Order. I don't need this help, though I know it's genuinely given. The member has been invited to ask his question again, and we'll proceed with that.
Which do I...
I want the question as on the sheet asked.
There is no Minister of Finance.
Point of order, Chris Hipkins.
Mr. Speaker, the concern the Leader of the House raises is a legitimate one, and that the question is down on the order sheet to the Minister of Finance. Technically, it should not have been accepted by the clerk because there is no Minister of Finance, there is only an acting minister. My colleague Grant Robertson asserted the word acting quite appropriately based on the ruling that you have made. Otherwise, he cannot ask it because there is no Minister of Finance to ask it to.
Order. I covered this off earlier. I gave the member, in fact, the Speaker's ruling to use, 1927. Once the member has appointed the acting minister, he is in effect the minister. I covered that off earlier. Grant Robertson, if we were to proceed with the question, otherwise I'm very happy to move to the next one.
Point of order, Mr.
No. Order. Member will resume his seat. I've discussed this matter enough. I'm not putting up with any more pointless points of order. A member can ask the question. Otherwise, I am quite happy to move immediately to question number 8. Question number 7, Grant Robertson.
To the Minister of Finance, does he agree with the Reserve Bank Governor Graeme that GDP growth on a per capita basis has been slow and productivity growth has been disappointing? House price inflation is much higher than desirable and poses concerns for financial stability, and the exchange rate is higher than the economic fundamentals would suggest is appropriate.
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Governor's statement overall, which I must say makes other comments prior to those highlighted to the member. It notes that relative, and I quote, relative to the trends over the last 2 decades, New Zealand is experiencing stronger economic growth, lower inflation and a lower unemployment rate, even with record levels of labour force participation. And then after the quote the member uses, the Reserve Bank Governor says that prospects look good for continued strong growth over the next 18 months. And this comments from the Governor mainly highlight the challenges arising from that growth. Once again, the member demonstrates his unerring ability to focus on the slightly less positive comments in a 2-page statement.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
What has GDP per capita growth been in the past year?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have it exactly at hand, but I understand. Actually, I do. Well, I can act.
Order.
Mr. Speaker.
Order. I gave a relatively severe warning to my right-hand side. I now need to deliver the same to members on my left. Question's been asked. It can be answered. Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr. Speaker, actually, I do have it to hand. It's 0.7 for the last year, and because the member doubts my knowledge of such things, I will say it's projected to be 1.5 in the June year to 2017, 1.7 in the June year to 2018, 1.5 in the June year 2019.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
What is net debt in dollar terms according to the half-year update?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave to table the half-year update for the member.
No, order, order, order. We need the answer. If that is the answer, we'll move on, but I'm certainly not putting the leave.
Well, Mr Speaker, I don't have the exact number for the member, but I do have the half-year fiscal update here, and I'm happy to table it for him.
Start. Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Why does New Zealand, according to the Productivity Commission, have the 4th lowest labour productivity growth in the world?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, one of the reasons is that it has one of the highest participation rates and one of the highest employment rates in the OECD. If the member has a look at the Productivity Commission report, he will note, for example, that some of the productivity and growth per capita measures are moving in the right direction, and in fact our growth per capita is one of the highest in the OECD.
Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
What responsibility does he take for New Zealand having the biggest increase in house price to income ratios in the world in the last 6 years?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, the increase in New Zealand house prices is fundamentally the product of three things. Firstly, the supply constraints that go back 20 years, and those supply constraints, while steadily being unwound, have contributed to increase in house prices. The second reason has been the historically low interest rates, which people would be minded to realise won't go on forever. And the third reason, Mr Speaker, has been the strength of the New Zealand economy, which has been one of the strongest in the OECD, with one of the strongest rising income rates. You take those three together, Mr Speaker, and the explanation for New Zealand house price increases.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
According to the half-yearly update, by how much will average wages rise over the next 3 years? I'll give him a clue. It's not much more than 1%.
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, actually the half-year fiscal update talks about the increase in wages over the next 4 years. Yes. They're expected to rise by $7,500 to $66,000 by 2020-2021.